just so you know, because I had this thing fail on me twice. So you seeing everything recording on your end too?
Yeah.
Okay. First thing I'm going to do is cut
double
my
check.
video. So I've cut my video.
Okay.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask questions. So give me a second to go on mute, and then whenever you're ready, you can
Okay.
go. And just one more thing before we start, I have usually we're looking for a 2 to 3 minute answer. Most people have kind of kept to that, and I will be timing it. Not to say that I'm going to stop you, but we are looking for sort of consumables. But if an answer,
actually, hang on one sec. I want to get my stopwatch. Just 1 second.
Oh, cool.
Okay, just 1 minute here. All right.
Nice.
We got the stopwatch all set up.
Very cool. All right.
Okay, so you said 2 to 3 minutes per.
Yeah, and it can be shorter, it can be longer. That's just our
average. That makes sense. Yeah. Okay, so that sounds good.
Perfect. All right, I'm going to shoot. So first question: what is the biggest ERP buying mistake today?
Well, I thought about this one, and there were a couple I wanted to use that I think are not as much of a problem now. One of the ones was falling for what I call cloud washing, which is kind of false cloud, if you will. And there's nothing wrong with hosted solutions, but they often have very different benefits than what I would call a true cloud platform. But the one thing I'm seeing is I think buyers are starting to understand some of those distinctions and ask better questions about the type of cloud solution and the deployment options. So I think that's not as much of a mistake as it was. Another mistake I used to see a lot was assuming that cloud solutions are by default a money saver, which isn't necessarily the case. It can be in some cases, but I would argue that the cloud value proposition goes far beyond simply a financial piece. And so that I think buyers are becoming more sophisticated on. So given that I think those things are not as prevalent, I'm going to pick over-reliance on a particular vendor and or service provider. And I think too often the incumbent vendors that companies work with are really pinpointed for the next implementation. And the problem there is that a lot of times these particular vendors don't have the best product for that company. They might be selling certain benefits such as integration with existing solutions or so-called ease of upgrade, but it's not always the case. Many times it's a re-implementation anyhow. I talked with one customer recently who was looking at a cloud ERP solution. They referred to their incumbent vendor and they said, you know what, they're in the final round, but they don't get any special considerations anymore. They have to show their value just like anybody else. And that is the way I would hope more customers would look at it in the future. And as far as service providers are concerned, one really important thing to note is that a lot of service providers will tell you they do cloud implementations and consulting, but in many cases, cloud implementations have a different approach and methodology, different considerations. And so I really want companies looking at cloud ERP to look at reevaluating their service providers and make sure they have the expertise in that. So I would say that's the biggest mistake today.
Sweet, thank you. That was right on the money. Time and your point. You're the first one to say that over-reliance point, so I really appreciate that, actually.
Yeah.
That's
cool. The one I found.
Very cool. Okay. Question 2. What ERP buying trends do you see in the marketplace?
Okay, so I'm going to answer this question in 2 ways. One, I'm going to talk about a bunch of different ways that companies are buying ERP. And then I'm going to talk about a general trend that I think is important. So in terms of different ways that companies are approaching ERP, one way I see is what I call legacy and line of business cloud, which is they're treating their existing ERP systems more as what they call a legacy investment, and they're looking for more immediate return on investment by basically implementing various point solutions in the cloud where they might be feeling particular pain or opportunity. A lot of times these days that's HR or CRM. Then I'm seeing the scenario of upgrade the core, and then also potentially look at some cloud solutions. So modernize the core so that you can better integrate. And usually more modern ERP systems have better integration protocols. So that's the motivation for upgrading the core. Another scenario I see is an upstart player that's really cloud from the ground up. A lot of new companies have really seized the cloud as their platform for all their software and development. And so they approach, when they have to look at ERP, they approach it in a similar sort of cloud-oriented mindset from the get-go. I also see the two-tier ERP scenario of subsidiary units standardizing on particular ERP systems, often cloud-based systems. You also see this with global expansion, where companies want to quickly expand to outposts and they don't have the infrastructure there, and they might go with cloud ERP. Then I see a lot of globalization and standardization. So lots of companies that have just found basically a mess of over-customized multiple instance sort of Franken project nightmare ERPs are looking at how they can globalize and standardize their implementations. And that might be on-premise or cloud, but it's basically a chance to refine processes and simplify their environments. And finally, yes, there's folks that are kind of in waiting or maintenance mode, and either they're frustrated by their existing solutions and waiting for something new, or often they're kind of focused on their current business opportunities and issues, and they're kind of waiting for the right time to reevaluate ERP. Now, the bigger trend that I want to talk about briefly is that in general, today's buyer, I've been doing a lot of research on this, is a much more informed buyer. They're taking advantage of online research. They're taking advantage of what I call trust networks. They're narrowing their decisions via research, via advisors, via conversations with customers. So what I'm basically saying is today's buyer has a much better BS detector.
BS detector, yes. I want to make that a headline.
Yeah. I'm trying to give you some quotables.
No, it's good. It's talking to different people, I really get a sense of you can't help it, but your personality and your way of writing comes through it, because
Right.
Your style of writing is you're not the researchy paper writing person.
Exactly.
It's just a different style. It's not better or worse. It's just a comment I'm making that it's
Yeah.
It's what I'm saying. Yeah. So I like it.
I just enjoy it. I just think I like trying to be informal and accessible. I just think that's how I like to have a voice, and it works for me, so I try to do that. So
yeah,
right.
time. Yeah, perfect. Next one. All right. How does cloud ERP help businesses accelerate?
Well, honestly, my first response to this question was a little bit snarky. I wrote in my notes that it doesn't always help business accelerate. And by that, I mean that cloud ERP isn't a cure-all. There still has to be a focus on whatever processes need to be optimized. There still has to be a focus on user adoption of the system and various other issues that prevent leveraging that product. But I will say that the one thing I like about cloud ERP in particular is that it really helps companies move away from what I would consider low-value system administration chores that have nothing to do with competitive advantage. It has nothing to do with business profitability. It's just basically chores. I also really think that cloud ERP provides an ideal platform for extending business applications via mobile devices, so it's much easier to start engaging casual users. And I'm not sure if that fits your definition of accelerate exactly, but to me, being able to involve more people easily in a platform and get them the data that they need is really appealing. And I think a cloud ERP platform just gives you a huge advantage in that regard.
Nice. All right.
Figure I'd mix it up with a shorter answer.
No, and
So.
like I said, it doesn't even have to be two.
Yeah.
So it's actually good, and I like sort of the fact that you're not agreeing with the statement too. Again, you're the first one to actually not agree with. I like it. It's good to mix it up. And you notice this is variations on the theme. So the next question really is, what's the pros and cons of cloud ERP versus on-prem ERP?
Now, full disclosure, I'm a pretty big cloud ERP advocate, and that I've come that way through many interviews with customers and delving into their use cases. The first advantage of cloud ERP, and I'm saying this a little bit like to be a little bit snarky, but cloud ERP is more secure than on-premise. Um, okay, that's a little bit of a joke. I'm not trying to make anyone feel self-conscious about their on-premise data center protocols. I just want to say that the studies that I have been reviewing have basically indicated to me that cloud ERP in many cases is more secure than on-premise. The reason being that cloud ERP vendors are subjecting themselves to very rigorous security procedures and protocols, and often those are very transparently laid out in the service level agreements that companies sign. What we find when we look at security breaches is that they often can happen on-premise as well. And so I think cloud security is certainly still something that we have to look at, but actually I think I was kind of joking, but I do think that the cloud ERP is just as secure as on-premise. I would say that cloud ERP isn't necessarily cheaper in the long run. I think that really depends. You have to really carefully forecast year over year. But in general, implementation are typically faster, and it allows you to grow without an IT department. And there are a lot of upstart companies that simply don't want to have an IT department. Other companies really want to have an IT department, but they really want to focus on building customer-facing applications or embedding their devices with smart technology. They don't want to mess around with patches and upgrades and system administration trivia. So cloud ERP has a huge advantage there. And I would also say in general that cloud ERP tends to have more modern UIs and be more mobile friendly. Now, when you talk about the advantage of on-premise ERP, I would say the one real pro there is there's a company called SnapLogic that does a lot of integration. They taught me this phrase called data gravity. And data gravity is where does your data, most of your data reside currently? And for some companies, especially large multinational companies, their data gravity, you could say, is closer to on-premise than cloud. If a lot of their other major systems that integrate with ERP are on-premise and they're sophisticated at running their own private data centers, then there's definitely an appeal to running ERP on-premise also, especially if those companies have skilled architects or perhaps they have specialized data and compliance requirements that they're used to. So there are still, believe it or not, some advantages to on-premise ERP.
So balanced.
Yeah.
I know, I like data gravity. It's the first time I haven't heard that.
It's a cool phrase. It's helpful to think about.
I know it means exactly what it says. You know what I mean? That there are some words that do that. That's really useful. All right. And I love your set of questions, by the way, because this is the ones that we're going to go into now. How does user experience factor in today's ERP buying decision?
Well, I just got back from a conference where I talked to a bunch of cloud HCM, cloud ERP folks about what they did. And I asked them specifically about user experience because I write a lot about UX, and I think user experience is really important. And it is increasingly a factor. The one thing I will say is I thought companies might have moved to the point where they value user experience even more than functionality, because in theory with cloud ERP, since you can update functionality pretty quickly, I thought, well, you know, maybe companies would even bend on some functionality in favor of the best user experience. That's not totally the case. Functionality is still a very, very strong consideration. But I will say that companies are looking at user experience very hard. So you say, well, why is that? It's because it's very tightly linked to adoption. It's become very, very difficult now to mandate users to use certain kinds of software. I had a company tell me about a cloud talent solution that they had. And it was hated by the users, and so no one used it. And when no one's using your system, you're suddenly exposed to a bigger risk than ever before, because now users feel empowered to the so-called shadow IT, right? So they'll download their own applications and start using them. It creates a management nightmare. And so adoption is a huge consideration. And so is extending systems to casual users, even simple things like workflow approvals or timesheet submittals or what have you. And a good user experience is essential to be able to get casual users to even bother to use the system. not to mention people like salespeople and field service workers that simply won't use software that isn't intuitive and easy. And let's face it, we've all been somewhat spoiled by the social network experiences, which may not be perfect, but they certainly are very clean and easy to use. So I think those things are all factors. The only thing I would say is that user experience is more than just a UI. It becomes the entire experience of working with the vendor, and I'll talk more about that in a future question, I think.
Nice. And your future question is actually very complimentary to us with the partners. We actually didn't have any partner question in there, so I appreciate this one. What role should advisors and services partners play in the ERP decision process?
Well, okay, so now we're into one of my stomping grounds. Like everyone has certain talking points that they maybe become known for. And one of my big ones is the importance of independent advisors during successful ERP projects. And by independent advisor roles, I mean during selection and during implementation throughout, including milestone audits or gut checks. And the reason independent advisors are so important is that most projects that I've looked at that have gone awry, you can oftentimes drill it down to overdependence on one particular service partner, or essentially by what I would consider biased advice by certain salespeople who have their own agendas, obviously. So independent advisors are really important. Some companies shy away from them because they're afraid of the political mix of introducing another party, but the politics can be managed, and it's really, really important to get those independent voices in there. The service partner is a big choice that can end up being key to the implementation. And I really believe in the importance of service partner that works in your industry and should have experience on cloud projects. And it's important to ask them about that and do some references and make sure that they have, if you're going in the cloud ERP direction, that they have done some cloud projects in the past. And I would say open up that service partner consideration. It may be that you'll need a new service partner for a cloud ERP project than ones you've worked with currently. It's also really, really important that your service partner is aligned with your own IT philosophy. So in other words, if you have an IT philosophy where you do have, you want to have an internal center of excellence, you want to have internal competencies, then you need an upskilling and training and knowledge transfer setup. If you have an architect internally, you want that coordinated with their own technical people. You want service partners that are transparent. Essentially, you want to trust them. You want them to be able to give you expertise that you don't have. You want to be able to personally interview the consultants who are going to be involved in your project and have some say-so on who those are. And mostly, I want service partners to have some skin in the game. And I know that goes against the grain of how a lot of service partners approach an implementation from a pricing and cost standpoint. There's not that many that structure projects where we succeed, you pay us when you have success. So I realize that's still a radical approach. But there are ways of structuring these agreements to make sure that service partners have a stake, not just in selling you software, but in the good result that you're hopefully going to get out of it in the end.
All right, super. I love this question. What is the biggest misconception about cloud ERP?
Well, I think there's a couple of misconceptions about cloud ERP to think about. A lot of times when you think about ERP, you're thinking almost like a bulky set suite of apps. I guess you could say like ERP is often thought of as like there's a bunch of different apps that are all tightly integrated. And that could be the case, but I would say that a lot of times you can approach cloud ERP in more of a component style where you start with one or two components and expand from there. Another big misconception is that cloud ERP will force you to standardize on certain processes and you won't be able to customize anything. That's really not true. A lot of cloud ERP systems give you some good configuration options, which your service partner should be able to help you with. And ideally, they should be extendable via a platform. And I think platforms are a major differentiator and should be in terms of which solution you would select, because platforms that partners can easily build additional solutions on are very helpful, because then you're able to avoid that dilemma where you're, okay, a lot of companies, they're leaving a legacy on-premise environment where they were customizing the hell out of things and it didn't work that well in the end. Yeah, they're now on a cloud solution, but they still want some differentiating apps and some custom capabilities. A platform is ideal for that. Another misconception about cloud ERP is that you no longer need to test anything. You still do. Testing still plays a role, and business user involvement is still critical. But what I would say is, if the system is easier to use, which often is the case, then you probably will have less of an intense training need and training budget because the system will hopefully be more intuitive. Another big misconception about cloud ERP is that you don't need internal skills and resources to implement it. You definitely do. Now, how much skills you're going to need internally is really going to depend on your IT philosophy and what your service partner is going to provide. But at the very least, you're going to need a skilled project manager who can involve business users who may not want to leave their desk jobs, and you need them to get involved. You need those highly skilled business users, and you need someone to manage a communications plan and basically sell the product internally and make sure senior management is in the loop. And and you might need a systems architect to integrate your cloud ERP with the rest of your architecture. So there are some different pieces that you may need, and cloud ERP can simplify, but you're still going to have to plan through that.
All right. We talked about buying mistakes. What do savvy buyers do to avoid them?
Right. So, look, I mean, there's no way to insulate yourself from every possible mistake. Every project I've ever talked to a customer about, there's probably one or two things they would have done differently. But when we think about this model of the informed buyer, we think about, how do I get there? One of them is the thing I talked about in terms of involving independent advisors in the process. I really recommend building out this, what I call a trust network, all the time. Subscribe to relevant blogs. Seek out contrarian views and opinions, outspoken people who might criticize things. You might read a blog criticizing the Magic Quadrant, for example, and so you're like, oh, well, no one's ever criticized that before. What's wrong with it? And it gets you thinking, which is very important. A trust network is going to be peers, maybe some analysts, some influencers don't fit any category, which might be someone like me. Another big piece of it is business users must be heavily involved. So I find again and again that when companies make mistakes in these projects, one of them is just not involving business users enough in what's happening, because you say, well, cloud ERP, it sounds so sexy and cool, and it can be, but the thing is that business users have to buy into it, and that means a lot of times learning new procedures, and you talk about change, managing change, and so involving business users from the beginning really helps you to get a leg up on change. And I would say, more than anything, show up at shows and kick tires and meet people. I go to shows all the time where I run into people who are actually not customers yet, and I'm like, what are you doing here? And they're like, well, I want to meet people and find out what they really like and don't like about these products. And I'm like, wow, that's really smart. And I think that's going to help those folks a lot when it comes time to actually signing the dotted line, which is dotted, you could say.
I like this one a lot. I like the breadth of your answer, from Magic Quadrants to kicking the tire.
Yeah, I thought I might make fun of Magic Quadrants a little bit, on behalf of Acumatica. But I was gentle, though. I was gentle.
You were very gentle, and I'm sure you're not you've made many other analyst friends by saying that.
Yeah, exactly. I don't give a shit.
And vendor friends. Okay, last one, and I can't wait to hear your answer. But if you had a relative or a very good friend who was considering buying a cloud ERP offering, what would you tell them?
Well, I told them, well, have fun with that. I don't know if I'd wish a cloud ERP project on the family member, but all kidding aside, though, I would tell them not all solutions are created equal. So open the process up and look at a range of options. Challenge yourself a little bit. Don't just stick with the status quo. I would also say, think ahead on this, because whatever you do next, it's not necessarily going to be super easy to move from choice to choice. So the next thing you pick, you want it to be a little forward thinking. So for example, cloud ERP should be a little sexy. By that I mean that users should really love it. I mean, we used to think about in terms of like users should maybe find this acceptable. Now we think about like, could users possibly love this? And I've talked with folks lately who've said, man, my users really love using this software. I mean, that's a strong thing to say. Look for something lightweight that's easy to use on all devices, easy to extend, easy to integrate. And not only that, but look at options with flexible pricing. Companies that want to have a long-term relationship that might, have more of a pay-as-you-go or pay per consumption instead of just that old archaic pay per user license that makes these solutions so hard to extend once you implement them. In other words, when you think about cloud ERP, think about how this might fundamentally change your business and fit in with your overall business direction, not just upgrade software because you're paying extra support in your existing solution. Look for something a little more imaginative. And finally, and I don't know if I would tell my relatives this because they might not be following along with this part, but I would pay strong attention to analytics and reporting and deriving value from data. So whatever you do next, I mean, okay, big data, Internet of Things, Hadoop, like not all of this stuff has obvious value for every company right now, but you have to figure some of that's going to factor into your future. So I would put Cloud ERP up against that and ask yourself how it's going to fit. And with that, I wish you best of luck on your projects.
Man, we need to hire you as our spokesperson.
Yeah,
I think you probably got all of our Valley Cross in there. You might not know it.
No, I paid attention at the Analyst Summit, man. But I was like, okay, I got to hit the pricing thing because that's a big one.
That is, yeah, we got to pull that out. Now we got to. Yeah, I like that one a lot. This is good. But yes, I also think that I do not wish Cloud ERP. There should be a quote on a T-shirt.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely. Okay, no, I like that was really good. That was nice, clean, very efficient. I think we got everything that it would be very easy cuts for our editor. Are you happy? Do you want to redo any of your answers? So I think all of them worked, unless you tell me otherwise.
No, it's fine. I've found that for the most part, with stuff like this, the first take is the best take, and I thought it was spontaneous, and it pretty much I covered. I think ultimately I covered all the points that I wanted to cover. So there were a couple answers where I missed one thing, but then I just worked it into the next answer. So I just looked at my notes. I got everything that I wanted to get. So
sweet. And I know I didn't tell you about this, but do you think you're ready to kind of do a quick like intro to Jon Reed kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna put myself on mute. So start whenever you're ready.
How long is this gonna be?
It's whatever you're comfortable with. So it's not terribly short, but I mean, when you think sort of something that gives people enough sort of context into why they should be listening to you, for example, you know what I mean? Yeah.
All right. Hi, so I'm Jon Reed. I'm co-founder of Diginomica, and we're trying to look at the digital enterprise and how technology is actually really impacting customers, and really look hard at what's working and what doesn't, with an eye towards really the enterprise and not everything else. So we're basically trying to, if you don't mind me using the word disrupt, we're trying to disrupt tech media by changing to a focus on enterprise issues and concerns over anything else. And as far as my own background is concerned, I'm kind of a weird mix because I'm a blogger and a journalist and an analyst. I'm all three, but arguably, kind of a mix of the three. I'm not a pundit. I'm not a guru. I really reject those things. I want to help customers and partners make their own decisions and their own implementations better as best I can by contributing content. And that's basically what I do. I'm also a member of the Enterprise Irregulars, which is a loose group of enterprise practitioners, and we argue all the time, and then some of that winds up influencing my articles that come out in the public domain just about every day on diginomica.com.
All right. That's a wrap.
Good enough?
Yes, I really liked it. That was, and we kept it under an hour. I like it when it's less to cut. It's nice, like I said, nice and clean, and Our goal, well, we'll see. I know they've got all the filming done. We're gonna chat with the editor, see what their schedule is, and wrap it all up, and then push them out. So, but you definitely be in the loop, and you see,
Okay.
the final cuts for you before we make anything live. So
Okay.
you have access to that.
Sounds good to
Yeah.
me.
Is there anything else that we had open? I can't remember.
I think we're good for the moment.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have any other pressing items. Just wanted to find out how you were doing. And now I got more news on the latest, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
And I'll get on the phone with you to chat more in the
okay.
future. But really appreciate your time today,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
have
I had
a
fun.
good rest. Yeah, I appreciate it, and thanks for jumping on this idea, because us, we're
Sure.
just always trying new things. So we
Yeah,
appreciate everyone who kind of joins us for the ride.
definitely. I thought it was great.
All right,
I'll
cool,
talk to you
man.
later, Dot.
Take
Take
care.
care. Bye.
Bye.